Wars do not end when the last soldier leaves the battlefield. That's what I learned in my line of work. And this year, it is a very good year for us to remember this, because we are celebrating 40 years of peace from 1975 to 2015. And this past month, July 27th, is also the Memorial Day of Vietnam. And that's the day, the month, that the whole nation honor those who sacrificed and died and served the country. And today, it is my great honor to be speaking to you, the youth and the young adults of Vietnam, about this very historic and tragic part of Vietnam. And here we are. It is a map of Vietnam. And it is the bombing map of Vietnam that keep a record of the bombing during 10 years in Vietnam. Why 10 years? It started in 1964 and it ended in 1973 when we had the Paris Peace Agreement between US and Vietnam. And it is a very detailed record that was provided by the US Department of Defense to the government of Vietnam, so that we have a good record of what was dropped in this country, so that we can go out and make an assessment of what is left in our soil, so that we can have a plan of cleaning it up. It's all red, can you see? And today, there are many wars, maybe it's small contained wars somewhere else in the world. They use targeted bombing. It means that they can bomb to a very precise area. But back then, it was carpet bombing. It means that it's like carpet. You just bomb and bomb and bomb. You bomb the whole country into oblivion. And remember, back then, we only had about 32 million people in this country. The amount of bomb that would drop into this country, in this little ribbon on the rim of the Pacific Ocean, was 7.6 million tons of bombs. You might not be able to comprehend the magnitude of this amount of bomb that would drop in this country. But if you read the history book of World War II, which was happened in European countries and also in the Pacific theater, the amount of bomb that would drop in Vietnam was more than 3 times of what was dropped in World War II. That should give you some idea. And that really comes down to each one of us, each one of our grandparents and parents, subject to a few hundreds of explosives per person. Quan Chi is the area, the province that was in the demilitarized zone, which was the boundary that divided the country in the north and south. It was subject to the heaviest bombing. Basically, the infrastructure was bombed flat out. People died, and they had to migrate to other provinces. And a few years ago, my organization, Vietnam Veterans of America Foundation, worked together with the Ministry of Defense of Vietnam, and we did an assessment in these provinces in central Vietnam, and it was found out that more than 1/3 of the landmass in central Vietnam is believed to be affected, to be contaminated with landmines and bombs that were dropped in this country, which ended 40 years ago. So let's park the thought there, right? That the bombing in Vietnam is the heaviest bombing in the history of mankind. Park that thought there. Who I am, who am I? Why am I here talking to you? My name is Thao, Nguyễn Thị Thu Thao. But I'm also known as Thao Griffiths because a lot of my work I have to be overseas outside Vietnam, and most foreigners cannot pronounce my name Nguyễn. So they would yell my name and I wouldn't know that they were talking to me. So I decided to adopt my husband's name, which is Griffiths. But that gave a false idea that I might be overseas Vietnamese or I'm American. No, I'm not. I'm born and raised and I live here. I was born in Ha Giang, in the very northernmost part of the country, in the mountain. And I work in this program for 14 years for an organization called Vietnam Veterans of America Foundation. I don't mean to give you an advertisement about my organization, but really, this is an organization that was set up by American soldiers who fought in the war in Vietnam, who had painful experience in Vietnam. They went back to America. They were at the very forefront to ask for, to advocate for reconciliation between two nations, two peoples, American and Vietnamese. And they also were among the first people that came to Vietnam and set up programs to address the consequence of war. And that is to deal with landmines, bombs, mental health, PTSD, people with disabilities, and particularly those affected by dioxin and Agent Orange. And so 40 years ago, we were enemies, America and Vietnam, but today, look at where we are. We are busy celebrating 20 years of friendship. We have many exchanges between peoples and governments. We just had our General Secretary of the country visited the US. It was such a historic visit. And we will soon perhaps have a President Obama to come to Vietnam. So that really shows how far we have come in the relations of two countries. How far America and American people have come to work with Vietnam, with our people, to clean up landmines and bombs and dioxin. Now let me tell you a little bit more about dioxin, or it's commonly known in Vietnam as Agent Orange. Dioxin is a chemical that is known the most toxic chemical known to human being. It does not degrade, or if it does, it will take hundreds of years. And one of the best ways to get rid of it is to burn it at very high temperature. And it gets into human body through food chain. And once it gets into your body, it affects the gene order. And that explains many people either would be having health problems or children are born with birth defect. And it is believed that during the war in Vietnam, the US uses many different herbicides which contain dioxin. And it subject 4 million Vietnamese people and 2.5 American soldiers who came to Vietnam. And many of them today are living with health consequence as a consequence of the exposure to Agent Orange, to dioxin. And last week, on the Memorial Day, July 27, I went to the Friendship Village, and that is a village, it's a residential program for people with disabilities, children of veterans, and veterans who has issue with their health. So they come there, they go there for rehabilitation. And in that village, I met with a gentleman by the name Lân. He served in A Lưới for 8 years, and A Lưới is in the border between Vietnam and Laos, and it is very close to Hamburger Hill. Perhaps you don't read Vietnamese history books, but you probably watch some American Hollywood movies, and Hamburger Hill is one of those Vietnam War movies that describe the brutality of the war in Vietnam. Mr. Lân had 3 children before he went to war. All of them were fine and normal. After 8 years of serving in the war in A Lưới, he came home and he had 3 more children. All of these 3 children are born with severe disability. One has passed away. 2 are still alive, but bedridden. And so, think about it. Here's another picture that I want to show you. With landmines and bombs, you can buy a metal detector to detect the metal in the bombs. With dioxin, you can burn it in high temperature and get rid of it. You might not know, but the Nan Airport has an area of contamination. The level of contamination there is among the highest level of contamination of chemical in the world. And in the last few years, the US government and Vietnamese government spent about $100 million to clean it up, and it's about to be finished. And it is a little contained area, so you'll be safe to travel to Da Nang and you'll be safe to use the Da Nang Airport. But that is what I want to show you, that it is an issue very much part of our daily life. But most of you don't know. You don't really know what's going on in Da Nang. You don't really know that the communities living close to Da Nang Airport, there are many children with disabilities are born there. You don't know that recently at a construction site, there was sand that was dredged from the Red River, and there was a bomblet within the sand. And as the concrete mixer was mixing, it exploded. So the worker standing next to the mixer, he died instantly. Or you don't know that when I was an expectant mother, I visited Quan Chi and I met with a mother who just lost a daughter. Her name is Huang. She was about 10 years old. And she was playing in her garden with a little machete. Don't know why she used a machete, the knife, a big knife. And there was a little bomblet, but it was covered in dirt. And she thought that it was a sweet potato. So she wanted to open it with her knife. What happened? It exploded. She died instantly. So if we pause a moment and we think about the trauma, the anguish of the family of the mother of Huang, or the boy who lost a father on that construction site, or Mr. Lun, who has to live with 2 children with severe disability. Every morning he wakes up, he has this fear, when I die, who's going to look after my 2 children? And he's 70-something years old. And if you stop whatever you're doing, Facebooking, go home and talk to your parents and talk to your grandparents. Ask them their war story. In every Vietnamese family, there is a war story. You'll be surprised to know how much you learn from them. And you'll be surprised to know that the war experience shaped their lives so fundamentally. Our grandparents, parents, uncles and aunties. And through that, it affects our life. It indirectly shapes our lives. Oh, you're playing with Google. Set the Google alert so that you can receive, whenever there is a press clippings on some accident set off by landmines and bombs in Vietnam and elsewhere in the world, you'd be surprised to receive how frequently you receive the press clippings of the accident of landmines and bombs in Vietnam, and of what happened in World War I and World War II, which ended more than 100 years ago. Today, in Europe, they still have that problem. What does it tell you? It tells you that we will have many more years to live with this problem. And you're going to have to do something about it. You know, the US government, the American people, they've done their part. They won't do more. The government of Vietnam won't do more. Our parents and grandparents did their part, you know. They fought in the war and they restored peace and they rebuilt the nation so that you can be born into it and live a good life as you do now. But what do you do now? Now that you know, now that I tell you, this little Lee, the girl, she's 8 years old. She lives just outside the Da Nang Airport. She's born with all kinds of deformities. She has a problem with breathing, her chest case. She has problem with, her skull too big. Her eyes are set apart too wide. But she's an excellent student. And you can do something about it, you know. You can go and teach her something. You go and teach her to draw, to swim, to do yoga, to play music. And not just her. so many other children with disabilities in this country. So many street kids out there in Hoan Kim Lake that could benefit from some of your compassion. It doesn't really matter what you do. It really matters that you do something meaningful. Something meaningful to honor the past, to fight for our future. Because if we don't do anything about this to help Lee and the like of Lee, the problem is not the problem of the past, of the war that ended 40 years ago, of the war that took 3 million lives of Vietnamese people. It is the problem of today, and it won't be a problem of the future, and it's very much part of your life. So it's about time for you to do something. And that's what I've been doing for the last 14 years with my life. And I consider myself as part of you, part of the young generation of Vietnam, that do not have a first-hand, direct wartime experience, but who are inheritors. We're the future of Vietnam. Earlier this month, I had the honor to meet with President Bill Clinton, and I was reminded of his first visit to Vietnam in November 2000. I remember it very well because it was on my wedding day. And I was up in my hometown in Ha Giang, and instead, I should be paying attention to the guests and to my husband, but instead my husband and I was having our eyes glued to the television because President Clinton was speaking on television, live broadcast through the nation. What did he say? He said this, that the history of Vietnam and the US are intertwined in so many ways. That was a source of pain, of suffering for many generations that came before us. But it is also the source of promise for many generations to come. And you are the generation to come. I invite you, I challenge you to join others to fight for the future, a future of Vietnam that will be free from impact of landmines and bombs, will be clean from dioxin, and people are born with normalcy. Farmers can access land without fearing that they would step on landmines and end their life. So it is now on you, and go and do it. Thank you.